Chosen one. Right now there's a house of cards collapsing, and you're the one who pulled the foundation out from under it. Not with revenge, but with truth. You've got them taking back what they said, realizing the hard way that protecting a liar was dumb. Every false story spun about you has become a boomerang, and now the panic is palpable. What once looked like power is now exposed as weakness, and here's the beauty of it. You didn't have to lift a finger. The truth simply stood still until their own weight crushed them. The same mouths that tried to bury you are now clearing your name. The same hands that pointed at you are now covering their faces in shame. This isn't karma later. This is justice unfolding now in real time. Let me show you exactly how you dismantled an entire operation without even trying. Because what looks like karma to others was actually strategy flowing through you. What feels like sudden collapse to others was inevitable the moment you made one critical decision. But we'll get to that. First, you need to see the full picture of what you were up against, so you can appreciate the magnitude of what you just accomplished. There was someone in your world who everyone listened to, someone who spoke with authority that wasn't earned but assumed, someone who positioned themselves as the wise one, the protector, the person who just knows things about people. This person created an entire profile of who you are, told others how to interpret your words, how to predict your actions, how to handle you. And the wildest part, barely knew you at all, but confidence sells, and a compelling lie about you was being sold to anyone who would buy it. The operation wasn't solo. There were multiple people moving as one coordinated unit, snake energy, working in perfect synchronization. The work was divided strategically. One would plant seeds of doubt, another would water those seeds with gossip, the third would harvest the destruction and package it as wisdom. And there were students, people who came to this toxic collective whenever there was any friction with you, any confusion, any moment that required actual communication. Instead of talking to you directly, these students would run to the snakes for interpretation. And every single time, the interpretation was engineered to destroy. When you set a boundary, the translation became control tactics, red flag. When you asked for honesty, the spin shifted to trust issues, major problem. When you showed up consistently, the narrative transformed into love bombing, classic manipulation. Everything you did got filtered through a lens of suspicion and malice, and the person closest to you, the one you actually cared about, was drinking this poison like it was life-giving water. You watched it happen in real time. Breakthrough conversations would occur, real vulnerability, real progress, patterns would be acknowledged, unfair treatment would be admitted, recognition would surface that outside voices were contaminating what you were building together. Hope would bloom in your chest. Finally, progress seemed possible. And then, like clockwork, a disappearance for a few hours, a visit to the toxic advisors, a complete reset upon return. Everything worked through together, erased, every awareness gained forgotten, every promise made, abandoned like it never existed. This was psychological warfare, and you were fighting an enemy operating in shadows, because these weren't random haters throwing shade from a distance. These were people with influence, people who had positioned themselves as family, as trusted advisors, as the ones who really care. So when you tried to point out the pattern, you became the villain in the narrative. Paranoia was the accusation. Isolation was the claim. Trust issues became your diagnosis. The gaslighting was professional grade, refined through years of practice. You started helping this person anyway, not because naivety clouded your vision, not because you didn't see what was happening, but because you understood something operating on a frequency beyond their comprehension. You were playing a completely different game. While checkers consumed their attention, you were setting up a chessboard, existing in dimensions invisible to their limited perception. You showed up during crisis moments, provided strength when reserves ran empty, helped organize chaos into manageable pieces, took on projects without being asked, remembered things that slipped through stressed minds. You were present for breakdowns and panic attacks and dark nights when everyone else disappeared. Access to your time, your energy, your resources flowed freely, and the snakes watched all of this happening with growing desperation, because your presence was exposing their absence. Your genuine support was highlighting their hollow advice. Your consistency was revealing their manipulation in stark contrast. So escalation became necessary in their minds. The gossip got more creative and vicious. The interpretations got more twisted and elaborate. Painting you as dangerous became the new priority. Someone with hidden motives lurking beneath kind actions. Someone too good to be true, which obviously meant a long con was being orchestrated. And the person you cared about started looking at you differently, questioning things that never needed questioning, accusing you of things that never happened, treating you like a threat instead of a partner. Explosion was available to you as an option, giving them exactly what warnings predicted was possible. Becoming the villain described in whispered conversations was within reach. That's what the whole strategy depended on. Breaking under pressure, lashing out in pain, proving the narrative correct through reactive behavior. But you didn't, and that's where miscalculation destroyed their entire plan. Recognition dawned in your awareness. This person you cared about wasn't ready for what you offered, too attached to dysfunction that felt familiar, too comfortable with chaos that felt like home, too invested in drama that the snakes kept feeding like an addiction, and no amount of love from you was going to compete with that toxic validation craved. So a decision formed that changed everything. You walked away, not with anger burning holes through your composure, not with lengthy explanations defending your character, not with dramatic exits designed for maximum impact. You just quietly, powerfully, completely removed your presence from their world. You took your light and redirected it toward your own path. And the moment that happened, the countdown started ticking. The collapse became inevitable. The snakes just didn't know it yet. The person you walked away from started struggling in ways that defied explanation. Projects fell apart without your organizational mind. Emotional stability vanished without your grounding presence. Forward momentum stopped without your encouraging push. Confusion reigned about why everything suddenly felt harder, why nothing was working the way it used to, why loneliness felt so crushing even though the same advisors remained available. And those advisors, the snakes who promised so much wisdom, nothing of substance could be offered, because building had never been their skill set, destruction was their only expertise. So when this person came looking for real support, for actual help, for something beyond gossip and games, emptiness was all that greeted them. Empty words, hollow promises, and eventually silence that spoke volumes. Meanwhile, transformation was happening in your world. Healing was occurring at cellular levels. Growth was manifesting in ways that only happen when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. And people noticed. People who actually mattered started gravitating toward your energy like moths to flame. Opportunities opened up that seemed impossible before. Doors you didn't even know existed started swinging wide on silent hinges. Your whole life started shifting into a higher gear, accelerating toward destiny. If you felt the truth in these words, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can see it. Other people started speaking up. People who'd also been victims of this same manipulation machine. People who'd also lost relationships because of these toxic advisors. People who'd been silent because isolation made them think being alone in this experience was their fate. Your story, your truth coming to light, gave permission for theirs to emerge from hiding. One voice became two, two became five, five became a chorus singing the same song of manipulation and lies, and suddenly the pattern was undeniable to everyone paying attention. This wasn't about you being problematic. This was about certain people being professional destroyers with a track record. The teacher who everyone trusted got exposed as jealous and vindictive. The protector who claimed to care got revealed as controlling and manipulative. The wise one who seemed to know everything got shown to be projecting darkness onto everyone in their orbit. And the person who'd chosen to believe snakes over you, sitting in wreckage now, looking at the consequences of every decision made based on poisoned advice, seeing clearly for the first time how weaponization occurred, how becoming a soldier in someone else's war happened gradually, how destroying something real became possible through trusting people who had nothing real to offer. The shame is crushing weight on shoulders. The regret is eating alive from the inside out. because realization is dawning now about what you are actually bringing to life. You weren't just there during good times and celebrations. You were there during crisis moments, the breakdowns, the times when no one else showed up or cared enough to stay. You were the answer to prayers being whispered in desperate moments, and jealous people convinced someone you were a problem to be solved. Looking at where things stand now versus where you stand creates devastating contrast. You're glowing with inner light. You're peaceful in ways that radiate outward. You're successful in endeavors you pursue. You're thriving in soil that nourishes growth. All the things the snakes said would never manifest, you're creating in abundance. And the person who lost you is stuck in the same cycles, just deeper, more broken, more trapped. And the people who promised to always be there, nowhere to be found when actual need arises. Here's what's really destroying peace of mind though. It's not just that you were lost, it's that discovery is happening about the snakes having other motives, financial motives, control motives, jealousy motives, that ran deeper than anyone suspected. People are coming forward now with stories about contracts that shouldn't have been signed, money that went missing under suspicious circumstances, relationships that got destroyed so someone else could benefit from the wreckage. This wasn't just about you. This was a pattern with a long history, and the person who lost you was just another mark in a long line of victims. Someone close to this whole situation is particularly vocal now. Confrontation is happening directly with the snakes. Words are being spoken that cut through excuses. You told me to end things. You told me trust was impossible. You convinced me to blow up my life, and now look where everything stands. You changed me for the worse, and I can see it now. And the snakes have no defense that holds up under scrutiny, because evidence is everywhere. The destroyed relationships, the broken people, the trail of manipulation leading back to the same source. Remember how inevitability was mentioned regarding this collapse. Here's why that was always true. You weren't just removing yourself from a toxic situation when you walked away. You were removing the one person who was holding their whole house of cards together through sheer force of genuine presence. You were the stable one, the genuine one, the one with actual value, and your presence was masking how hollow everything else was in that dynamic. The moment you left, reality set in like cold water, and reality doesn't care about narratives. Reality doesn't care about gossip. Reality doesn't care about manipulation tactics. Reality only responds to what's real, and you were the only real thing in that whole dynamic. Everything else was performance. Everything else was facade. Everything else was people pretending to be something other than what lived in their core. Claims of manipulation fall flat when you're the one who walked away clean. Accusations of untrustworthiness crumble when you never violated a single confidence. Warnings about game playing sound hollow when you were the only one being direct. Suspicions about ulterior motives dissolve when you're the only one whose actions matched words consistently. Every accusation boomerangs back and hits the accusers in the face with the force of undeniable truth. The person who lost you is now in conversations where questions are being asked that have no good answers. Wait, what exactly did this person do that was so bad? And when attempts are made to repeat what the snakes taught, it sounds hollow even to the speaker's own ears. Set boundaries doesn't sound like abuse when spoken aloud to rational minds. Asked for honesty doesn't sound like manipulation when examined in daylight. Walked away when disrespected doesn't sound like game playing when measured against self-respect. It sounds like someone who knew their worth. And that's the moment everything clicks into place with devastating clarity. That's when realization hits that defending the indefensible became normal. That protecting liars lying about someone being real became a mission. That becoming a warrior for a cause built on jealousy and control and destruction became an identity. And now living with that reality is unavoidable. Now facing people and admitting being wrong is necessary. Now taking back words spoken with such misplaced confidence is required. It's not just that being wrong about you occurred. It's that being wrong about you meant being wrong about everything else too. Because an identity was built around being the one who could see through people, the one smart enough not to be fooled, the one who listened to wisdom and avoided traps, and you just proved that discernment was completely corrupted. that the wisdom source was toxic, that the whole framework for understanding people was backwards and broken. That's an identity crisis on a fundamental level. That's not just oops, a mistake was made. That's everything believed about reading people and situations was inverted from truth. That's devastating to the core sense of self. And you didn't even have to say a word to create that devastation. You just had to be yourself. You just had to stay in your integrity. You just had to refuse to become what accusations painted you as. The snakes are dealing with something even worse than an identity crisis. Watching an empire crumble in real time is their current reality. People aren't just questioning the wisdom dispensed. People are actively warning others about the danger these snakes represent. Reputation is being destroyed by the very people who were thought to be controlled. And here's the kicker that makes this poetic justice. Defense isn't possible without exposing more lies. Every attempt to explain behavior just reveals another layer of calculated manipulation. One snake tried to say protection was the only motive, but then people started asking the right questions. Protect how exactly? By teaching lies, by encouraging surveillance, by fostering suspicion of someone showing up with genuine care. The protection narrative falls apart under even basic scrutiny, because real protection doesn't look like teaching someone to destroy a good thing. Real protection looks like teaching someone to recognize and appreciate a good thing when it appears. Another snake attempted the bad feeling defense, but feelings divorced from facts don't hold up in light. And when your feeling is contradicted by every single action someone takes, at some point admitting the feeling was just personal jealousy or insecurity or control issues becomes necessary. You can't keep calling intuition what is clearly just prejudice dressed up in spiritual language. The third snake went with too perfect, something had to be wrong. And that might be the most revealing admission of all. Because what that really translates to is, genuine goodness couldn't be believed, so problems had to be found or created. That's not wisdom, that's cynicism masquerading as discernment, that's bitterness disguised as protection. That's someone so damaged by past experiences that recognizing healthy when it's directly present became impossible. And now all of these justifications are being picked apart in public and private conversations. The students who believed are realizing poison was the education received. The people who defended are backing away slowly like from a crime scene. The ones who repeated lies about you are scrambling to distance themselves from the whole situation. Because association with these snakes is now toxic. Being known as someone who believed them is now embarrassing. This wasn't just a personal situation affecting a small circle. This was a systemic problem with roots going back years. These snakes had been operating like this for a long time. You weren't the first victim in their history. You were just the one who refused to stay silent. You were the one whose truth was so undeniable that it gave others courage to speak up too. You were the catalyst that brought down an entire operation built on lies and manipulation. And the beautiful thing is, intentionality wasn't driving this exposure. Revenge wasn't the mission. Destroying anyone wasn't the goal. You were just living in your truth and protecting your peace. The exposure happened as a natural consequence of refusing to participate in lies. When you removed yourself, you took the cover hiding their dysfunction. Your presence had been camouflaging their toxicity. Your genuine care had been compensating for their destructive influence. Your strength had been keeping someone afloat, despite the weights constantly being attached. When you left, everything hidden became visible. The person you walked away from started sinking, and the snakes had no rope to throw. Just more manipulation, more mind games, more toxic advice that couldn't address real problems. And that's when the students started to wake up. That's when other people started comparing notes. That's when the house of cards started its final inevitable collapse. The person who lost you is now having to explain to mutual connections why you were treated so poorly. And discovering that nobody's buying the explanations is creating more pain. People who watched how you showed up are confused by the narrative that you were the problem. People who witnessed your consistency are baffled by claims that you were playing games. People who saw your character are questioning how anyone could have painted you as untrustworthy. And with each conversation, More words are being taken back. More admissions are being made. Control was claimed, but really just boundaries existed, that respect was refused for. Manipulation was accused, but really just honesty was requested. Games were suspected, but really indirect communication was happening with expectations of mind reading. Trust was questioned, but really shadiness was occurring, and projection was the response. Every retraction is humiliating. Every admission is painful. Every correction is exposing more truth. The snakes are attempting damage control, but timing is wrong. Credibility is gone. Influence is destroyed. Tactics are known and named. People are actively avoiding contact now, refusing to confide in them, cutting off attempts to gossip, calling out attempts to manipulate. The power held was based entirely on people trusting them, and that trust is obliterated beyond repair. Some are trying to apologize to you, but apologies become exposure documents in themselves, because apologizing requires admitting what was done, and what was done is so extensive, so calculated, so destructive, that the apology itself becomes evidence of how deep corruption ran. Attempts to minimize are happening, trying to frame everything as misunderstanding or miscommunication, but you know better, and increasingly, everyone else knows better too. The person who lost you is watching you thrive, and something fundamental is breaking inside, because your success without that connection proves you never needed it the way assumptions suggested. Your peace without that relationship proves you weren't the source of drama claimed in whispered conversations. Your growth without that dynamic proves you weren't holding anyone back. You were being held back. Every day you spend being happy and successful and unbothered is another nail in the coffin of the narrative built against you, and understanding is starting to form that's crushing in its weight. You were offering a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, access to someone rare, someone genuine, someone powerful, someone who actually cared, and that was traded for validation from people who didn't actually care at all. Hollow affirmation was chosen over real connection. Comfortable lies were chosen over uncomfortable truth. Familiar dysfunction was chosen over unfamiliar health. Now living with the consequences of that choice is unavoidable, and the consequences are severe. Loneliness exists in ways it didn't exist before. Struggling is happening in ways it wasn't happening before. Being lost feels different now, more permanent, and the people chosen instead of you, not there, never going to be there, because investment in well-being was never their motivation. Control and feeling superior was what invested in maintaining. This is what happens when protecting liars becomes a priority. Complicity in destruction becomes your reality. Becoming a casualty of war you didn't start becomes your fate. Becoming collateral damage in games you didn't choose to play becomes your experience. And eventually, when lies collapse under their own weight, you're buried in the rubble alongside the liars. The person who lost you is learning this lesson in the hardest way possible, through lived experience, through undeniable consequences, through isolation created by listening to the wrong voices. But here's what you need to focus on, chosen one. This isn't about them anymore. This isn't about the snakes anymore. This isn't about vindication or validation or watching people suffer consequences. This is about you stepping fully into your power and purpose. This is about you recognizing that what you survived was designed to prepare you for what you're about to walk into. You were in a training ground. Every manipulation tactic experienced taught you how to recognize it instantly in future encounters. Every lie told about you strengthened your commitment to truth as a non-negotiable value. Every time gaslighting was attempted, you became more grounded in your own reality and perception. Every betrayal refined your discernment to levels most people never reach. Every time you chose yourself, you built unshakable self-respect that nothing can diminish now. You're not the same person who entered that situation. You're infinitely more powerful, and the life opening up in front of you requires this level of power. The opportunities coming your way need someone who can't be manipulated by smooth words and false promises. The connections entering your field need someone who values truth over comfort. The purpose you're walking into needs someone who's been tested and proven in fire. Everything you went through was preparation, and you passed every test with grades that exceed expectations. So let the words be taken back. Let apologies be offered, and explanations be attempted, and sense-making be pursued. That's their process. That's their lesson. That's their journey back to integrity, if that choice gets made. Your journey is forward, into expansion, into elevation, into everything you were created for, and nothing spoken or left unspoken changes the trajectory you're on. You're unstoppable now, unshakable, undeniable, and everyone who doubted you is about to see exactly who you've always been. The chosen one who couldn't be broken, the light that couldn't be dimmed, the truth that couldn't be buried. Keep walking. The universe has your back, and the best part of your story is just beginning. What you need to recognize right now is how your energy signature has completely transformed. Before this whole situation, you carried a certain frequency. You were open in ways that made you vulnerable to manipulation. You gave people the benefit of the doubt, even when red flags were waving. You extended grace even when patterns kept repeating. That version of you was beautiful and necessary for that season, but that version couldn't carry you into where you're going next. The fire you just walked through burned away everything that wasn't essential. Your people-pleasing tendencies, ash. Your need for external validation, dust. Your willingness to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, completely incinerated. What remains is pure essence, concentrated power, undiluted truth. You're operating now from a place of such clarity that confusion can't even approach your field without being immediately identified and rejected. Think about how you move through the world now compared to before. You can spot a liar within moments of interaction. You can feel manipulation before words are even fully formed. You can sense when someone's energy doesn't match their presentation. This isn't paranoia. This isn't being jaded or closed off. This is wisdom earned through direct experience. This is discernment sharpened on the whetstone of betrayal. You didn't become hard or bitter or cynical. You didn't close your heart off to genuine connection. You didn't decide that everyone is out to get you. You simply elevated your standards to match your worth. You simply started requiring that people's actions align with their words. You simply stopped accepting potential as a substitute for actual behavior. That's not being difficult. That's being aligned. The people who knew you before and see you now are noticing the difference. Some of them are intimidated by it. Your new boundaries make them uncomfortable because they realize they could never cross the lines with you that others crossed. Your new standards highlight their own lack of standards. Your new peace exposes their chaos as a choice rather than a circumstance. Just by existing in your elevated state, you're holding up a mirror that many people don't want to look into. But the right people, the ones who are supposed to be in your next chapter, are drawn to this new frequency like metal to magnet, because what you're emanating now is rare. Strength without arrogance, wisdom without bitterness, boundaries without coldness, discernment without judgment. This combination is magnetic to other people operating at high frequencies and repellent to those still playing low-level games. You're also noticing how differently you respond to situations now. Someone tries to gaslight you. You don't even engage in the circular argument anymore. You just remove yourself from the conversation and the connection if necessary. Someone attempts manipulation. You spot it immediately and call it out or walk away, depending on whether the relationship has enough value to warrant the confrontation. Someone shows you through repeated behavior who they are. You believe them the first time now, instead of making excuses for them through multiple cycles. This efficiency in handling toxic behavior is saving you years of wasted time and energy. Think about how long you stayed in that previous situation trying to make it work, trying to communicate more clearly, trying to be more understanding, trying to give more chances. Now you understand that when someone shows you incompatibility with your values and standards, believing them quickly and moving on accordingly is wisdom, not giving up. And what you're discovering is that this approach doesn't make your life lonelier, it makes it richer. Because the space you're no longer filling with people who don't deserve access is being filled with people who do. Quality over quantity isn't just a nice phrase anymore, it's your lived reality. You'd rather have a small circle of genuine connections than a large network of superficial relationships built on false pretenses. The person who lost you is starting to understand this too. Watching from whatever distance remains, the observation is unavoidable. You're not desperately seeking replacement for what was lost. You're not posting cryptic messages or seeking attention or doing anything that suggests brokenness. You're just living fully and joyfully and powerfully, and that reality is more devastating than any revenge could be. Because here's what that communicates loud and clear. You didn't need that relationship to be complete. You didn't need that person to be happy. You didn't need their validation to know your worth. You were whole before, and you're whole after. The relationship was an addition to your life, not the foundation of it. And when it became toxic, you had the strength to subtract it without your entire structure collapsing. That's the kind of strength that can't be faked or performed. That's the kind of peace that comes from knowing yourself so deeply that external circumstances can't shake your core. That's the kind of power that intimidates people still dependent on others for their sense of self, and that power is only going to grow stronger as you continue on this path. Now let me put you onto something real. Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching chosen ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. You're also recognizing patterns now that you couldn't see before. How the snakes always targeted people during vulnerable moments. How the manipulation always increased when you started gaining confidence or success. How the lies always escalated when you started pulling away. These weren't random occurrences. These were strategic moves in a game you didn't even know you were playing. But now you know the game. You know the players. You know the tactics. And you know how to win simply by refusing to play. That's the ultimate power move. Not trying to beat them at their own game. Not trying to out-manipulate the manipulators. Just stepping off the board entirely and building your own game with your own rules, where only people who can play with integrity are allowed to participate. This is what being a chosen one really means. It's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being called to a higher standard because you're capable of meeting it. It's about going through fires that would destroy others and coming out refined instead of reduced. It's about taking wounds that would make others bitter and letting them make you wiser instead. It's about being tested in ways that reveal your true character and passing those tests even when no one's watching. And the beautiful thing about this journey is that it's preparing you for something specific. The universe doesn't refine people for no reason. The level of testing you've endured indicates the level of assignment waiting for you. The magnitude of betrayal you've survived suggests the magnitude of blessing you're about to walk into. The depth of pain you've transformed suggests the depth of purpose you're about to step into. So keep walking forward, chosen one. Keep building, keep growing, keep shining. The words being taken back behind you aren't your concern. The apologies being practiced in private aren't your business. The regret being felt by those who chose wrong isn't your burden to ease. Your only job is to keep becoming more of who you were always meant to be. And from where you're standing now, the view ahead is magnificent.